Welcome back, everyone. Today I wanted to do another kind of random installment of Introduction to Insect Taxonomy and Identification with a really strange fly that I've just recently been getting into. And I figured I'd share it because there's not a whole lot of other insects quite like this. To start off, the flies are in the order Diptera, and the Diptera are literally two wings. So these are, the house flies and things like that. Diptera tend to only have, or do only have two wings unless they're completely wingless, which they are in some cases. But the fore wings are well developed, and the hind wings, all that remains are something called halteres, which are just little nubbins that are left of the previous wings that were there. Adults tend to have sucking mouthparts. The larvae tend to be what we call maggots. So a soft, fleshy, very few features. They tend not to have a lot of sclerotized parts. There's roughly 160 families of Diptera and something crazy like 150,000 species. So it's a very, very large family. The Diptera are divided into two, you can call them suborders, but one's a real suborder, the Brachycera, and then the Nymphomyiidae is a fake suborder, but it's very, very useful for classification. The Brachycera are the insects that you would normally consider what you think of when you think of a fly. So they tend to be kind of stouter bodied, thicker bodied. Their antennae are very small. They tend to have these aerostate antennae. So this would be a Brachycerus fly. So what you think of when you think of a fly, and they are defined by these tiny modified antennae where you basically have one big section on the bottom and a little hair coming out of it, the aristate antenna. And this is what you kind of think of when you think of a fly. So like fruit flies, things like that, pumice flies, the little gnats that you get around your bananas, stuff like that. So those are the Brachycera. The other group are the Nymphomyiidae. And Nymphomyiidae is not a real classification anymore, but people still use it because it's very helpful. These are really could be called the non-Brachycera flies. And there's 36 families of them, and these are kind of known as the thread horn flies. These are flies that have very thin, long, segmented antennae. They tend to have thinner bodies. They tend to have thinner wings. So when the kind of quintessential one, it would be like a mosquito, right? So this is a fly, but it's not. It doesn't have the body shape of something like a housefly or a fruit fly. Much thinner, longer antennae and wings. So the antennae here tend to be thread-like, and a lot of them tend to have like plumose antennae. The wings tend to be pretty long, pretty thin. The family that we're most interested in today is the Nymphomyiidae. There's about 9 species globally and only 2 species in North America. And in North America, these are limited to the eastern parts of North America, specifically like New England and the far eastern part of Canada. There's a few found in the Appalachian Mountains, but that's it. Globally, the other species are found in Siberia and Japan, and I think maybe 1 or 2 species in the Himalayan mountains. So there's maybe 9 species, maybe. There's not a ton of people working on these, and they're a relatively new find from originally discovered in 1932 in Japan. Family is a little strange. If we go to the adults, this is what the adult fly looks like. Immediately, you'll notice that there's some very non-fly-like features here. The only thing that really gives it away that it is a fly is that it only has 2 wings. So they have these low venation wings, extremely plumose, kind of like fairy wasps, if you've ever seen a fairy wasp, where the wings are primarily hairs, and this very long, unspecialized, undifferentiated body. And this fly, why it looks like this, is the adults are what is called neotenic. They are adults with larval features. And so if we zoom in here, you'll see some strange things about them. They have, just these 2 kind of overdeveloped wings. They have cerci, which is really strange. Usually you will only find those in larvae for the higher insects. An extremely long abdomen that doesn't seem to be compressed at all like you would see in a lot of other flies. Like if we look at some other flies here, you will see that the abdomen is actually more round, and it's because the segments tend to be more compressed. Sometimes the last several segments will form a pseudo-ovipositor in which it's actually inverted inside the body, and you don't see that with the nymphomyiids. So the adults are larval in body form, which leads into the larvae. So let's talk about the larvae in comparison to something like the Brachycera larvae. So the Brachycera tend to have a certain body shape with the larvae. Not all of them, but it's very common for the larvae to have what is called a carrot-shaped body, and they tend to be extremely fleshy. There's no head capsule. There's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of features on the Brachycera larvae. When we're talking about the nematocerans, they tend to be a little different, and the nymphomyiids in particular don't have that sort of body shape. They don't have a tapered body for the most part, so it's a long, straight body, similar to the adults for the group, and their head is actually sclerotized. And this is a more common feature in the Nematocera flies. They tend to be more primitive, and they tend to have features of the other insects. So something similar to like a beetle larva, where you have a soft body and a sclerotized head. That is the setup with the nymphomyiid flies. So the nymphomyiid larvae tend to be long, they have the head capsule, and they live either underwater in streams or in like very saturated moss. The larvae are filter feeders or grazers, and they feed on the periphytic films in streams. So periphytic films, if you've ever been swimming in a river or a stream or anything, there's kind of that algal slime that's kind of all over the rocks. These guys feed on that, and I believe this is the postmentum here. They have like this fringed plate for scraping, which is very useful. When they're alive, when these larvae are alive, they're actually clear. So you can tell that this one's dead because it's white. So all of the fat in the body has kind of denatured, and you can see it better. But when they're alive, they're almost perfectly clear, except for that head capsule. So they're very, very hard to find. And they are also really, really hard to find because they only live in specific streams. The water needs to be cold, clean, moving. It needs to be a permanent flow. So none of the seasonal like snowmelt streams or rainwater streams, nothing like that. But when you do find them, specifically in like New England or the Appalachian Mountains, you can find them in huge numbers. So they've been recorded at more than 4,000 individuals per square meter, which is kind of crazy. But remember, these are also really, really small, 1.5 millimeters frequently. There are 4 larval instars, and then they pupate in the water, we think. And then you get the adults emerging. So then these guys emerge from the water, and they only emerge just long enough to mate. And this is probably why they have retained their this sort of neoteny with the adult body looking like the larva, is as soon as they mate, they go back into the water as adults. So when they mate, they come out of the water, the males and females find each other in these big clouds, and then their wings fall off. So get rid of these wings, and they fall back into the water while coupled. So I want to read this quote. This is a quote from that monograph that I'm linking in the description. Adults locate a mate soon after emergence. They then couple, crawl beneath the water in copula, select an oviposition site, and the female lays a rosette of eggs around the coupled bodies. Finally, the adults die in copula. So this is how they're frequently found, with the eggs attached to the dead bodies that are still in a mated coupling in the water. The adults don't feed. They don't even have mouth parts. All of their mouth parts are vestigial. There's no intention for them to continue living. And they go through this life cycle multiple times a year. So the larvae are not super long lived like you see with the mayflies or something, where they can live for like 14 years. The larvae are just alive for a few months, and then they just repeat this cycle over and over again. So the other really cool thing about this family, other than that it's extremely small The adults, there's only 9 species, and then they're also extremely small in that they're tiny. They weren't discovered until the 1930s. Is that they are, I'm not going to say the only ones, but they're the only ones I've seen that are holoptic. So this is the top of the head. This is the adult fly. If you look at the top of the head, it looks like they have 2 eyes. But what's cool is if you flip the body over and look at the underside of the head, they are eventually holoptic, meaning that the eyes have fused into one big eye. And what's cool about these guys, at first when I saw them, when you see this, if you're familiar with the strepsipterans, they kind of have that strepsipteran eye. It's kind of referred to as a raspberry eye, where the individual lenses are huge and you have like this big protuberance from the head. But it's actually just one giant eye. Like their head is basically just one giant eye with some antennae sticking out of it. It's crazy. And I would assume this is just because they only live long enough as adults to find, mates. So who needs eyes? You just need to be able to locate a mate, locate the surface of the water, and you don't really need to see anymore. These are photos from that monograph, and the author took a ton of photos. So there's definitely a lot to look at if you want to open that up. But this is just overall a really weird family. So I wanted to share this with you guys. This is all I am going to talk about today, and I'll see you later.